Welcome to the most thrilling story you'll hear today. Get ready for drama, power, and an unforgettable lesson. If you love gripping stories that keep you on the edge of your seat, hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications. Don't miss what's coming next. The Skyview restaurant stood high above the bustling city, perched on the rooftop of a towering skyscraper. It was a place reserved only for the elite, where politicians, billionaires, and socialites dined under golden chandeliers, sipping rare vintages as they gazed out at the glittering skyline. Tonight, the air was thick with sophistication. The soft glow of candlelight flickered across polished tables, and the distant rumble of thunder hinted at an approaching storm. Outside, a light drizzle coated the city streets, but inside, everything remained flawless, at least on the surface. The well-dressed guests moved effortlessly through the luxurious space, their conversations filled with whispers of power and wealth. The sound of crystal glasses clinking added to the symphony of exclusivity. However, beneath the polished veneer, an unsettling presence was about to disrupt the illusion of perfection. The restaurant's manager, Sophia Reynolds, was meticulous about maintaining order. She had spent years curating an atmosphere where only the right people belonged. That's why when a lone figure entered, dressed in nothing more than a black button-up shirt, dark jeans, and worn leather shoes, her instincts screamed that he didn't belong. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across his sharp features. He moved with an eerie calmness, his presence almost unnatural. What Sophia didn't know was that the moment he stepped inside, the course of the night, and her entire life, had already been decided. The moment David Carter stepped into the Skyview restaurant, a hush seemed to settle over the room. It wasn't immediate, but it was there, a slight hesitation in conversation, a flicker of curiosity in the eyes of the elite guests. He didn't fit in, at least not by the usual standards of this exclusive establishment. No tailored suit, no expensive watch, no air of desperate entitlement. He moved with quiet confidence, unfazed by the grandeur around him. The low hum of jazz music played in the background, but even that seemed to dim as Sophia Reynolds, the restaurant's manager, laid eyes on him. From behind the sleek marble podium, Sophia's trained gaze swept over him like a scan, her practiced smile freezing for just a fraction of a second before returning, tighter than before. To her, he was an intruder, someone who didn't belong among the city's elite. Her heels clicked sharply against the polished floor as she strode toward him, chin lifted ever so slightly, her expression a mask of well-practiced politeness hiding a sneer. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, her tone laced with subtle condescension. "This section is reserved for our VIP guests. The casual dining area is downstairs." David tilted his head slightly, studying her. A slow, almost amused smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "Are you sure about that?" he asked. Outside, the wind howled. A distant flash of lightning illuminated the city skyline. The storm was coming. Sophia's polite facade barely masked her irritation. She had spent years perfecting her ability to filter out those who didn't belong, ensuring the exclusivity of Skyview remained untouched. Yet, this man, this nobody, stood before her, completely unaffected by her presence. His confidence was unsettling. There was no nervous shifting, no apologetic fumbling for a reservation confirmation, just that same calm, unwavering gaze. Emma, the young waitress nearby, hesitated, glancing nervously between David and Sophia. She had seen that name, David Carter, somewhere before. But before she could say anything, Sophia cut her off with a sharp wave of her hand. "There's no mistake," Sophia said, her tone now dripping with open disdain. "I know exactly who belongs here and who doesn't." A few nearby guests had begun to take interest, their whispered conversations pausing as they stole glances at the confrontation. The elegant James and Victoria Lancaster watched with amused curiosity, sipping their wine like spectators at an unfolding drama. One woman leaned toward her husband, murmuring, "He's clearly in the wrong place. Why doesn't he just leave?" David chuckled, a deep, quiet sound that sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. He reached into his pocket, not for a wallet, but for his phone. He tapped a message quickly and then placed it face down on the pristine white tablecloth. "You should rethink your assumptions," he said smoothly. Outside, a crack of thunder rattled the windows. The storm was no longer approaching, it was here. The air inside the Skyview restaurant grew heavier, thick with a tension that made the candle flames flicker. Sophia's confidence, once unwavering, now wavered slightly as David Carter remained calm, his eyes dark pools of unreadable intent. The hushed whispers of the elite diners grew louder. The Lancasters leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Emma, still clutching the guest list, hesitated. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," Sophia declared, her voice sharper now, her frustration barely contained. "We don't accommodate unregistered guests." David didn't move. Instead, He picked up his phone, glancing briefly at the screen before setting it back down. The corner of his lips twitched, not in irritation, but amusement. "You really should check your reservation list," he said softly. A deep rumble of thunder rolled outside, shaking the windows. The lights flickered. Sophia scoffed. "I don't need to. I know exactly who." But before she could finish, the restaurant's owner stormed through the entrance. His face was pale, his breath sharp. He looked directly at David, his voice trembling with urgency. "Mr. Carter," he blurted, almost breathless. I had no idea you were here. I sincerely apologize for any inconvenience." The room went silent. Sophia's body stiffened, her face draining of color. James Lancaster exhaled, stunned. "Wait. He's the..." David leaned forward slightly, his voice as steady as ever. "I gave her a chance to do the right thing," he said. "She chose otherwise." The silence in the Skyview restaurant was deafening. The weight of the revelation pressed down on everyone like the storm outside, now raging with full force. The flickering candlelight cast eerie shadows on Sophia's pale face as realization crashed over her like a tidal wave. She had insulted, dismissed, and humiliated the very owner of the restaurant she prided herself on protecting. David Carter remained seated, his expression calm, almost bored. He swirled the wine in his glass, taking his time as the restaurant's actual owner stood frozen in panic. James and Victoria Lancaster, once so entertained by the spectacle, now looked like they had swallowed something bitter. Emma, gripping the reservation list, knew she should have spoken up earlier. Sophia opened her mouth, desperate to regain control.
"Mr. Carter, I didn't know," she stammered.
David finally looked at her, his gaze sharp as glass. "You didn't care to know," he corrected smoothly. "You judged me the second I walked in, without a second thought. That's a liability I can't afford in my establishment." A bolt of lightning flashed, illuminating the sheer panic in Sophia's eyes. "Please, I can explain," she pleaded, stepping closer. But the restaurant's owner turned to her, his voice final. "Sophia, you're dismissed." Immediately. Gasps rippled through the restaurant. Sophia stumbled back as if struck, her polished world shattering before her eyes. David stood, adjusting his sleeve. "Let this be a reminder," he said to the room, "that respect isn't a privilege, it's a requirement." Then, with a final sip of his wine, he walked away, leaving only silence and the echo of his lesson behind. As David Carter walked toward the exit, the tension in the restaurant remained thick, suffocating. The once bustling chatter of the elite diners had dwindled into hushed murmurs, their carefully curated worlds momentarily shaken. Sophia stood frozen in place, her breath shallow, her entire existence unraveling in mere minutes. She had spent years building her reputation, controlling every detail of Skyview's exclusivity, only to be undone by her own arrogance. Emma, still gripping the reservation list, finally let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She looked at David with something between awe and regret, regret that she had hesitated, regret that she had stayed silent when she knew the truth. James and Victoria Lancaster exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Well," James muttered, clearing his throat, "that was unexpected." But even he, for all his wealth and status, knew the lesson was clear. David paused at the door, turning back just as the storm outside cracked another bolt of lightning across the sky. His voice, steady and unwavering, carried through the silent room. "Power isn't about wealth," he said. "It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching." Then, without another word, he stepped into the night, disappearing into the storm. Sophia swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her downfall settle in. She had thought herself untouchable. But tonight, she had learned, some mistakes can't be undone. The heavy doors of Skyview restaurant shut behind David Carter, but the impact of his words lingered like an unshakable presence. The air inside felt different now, tainted with humiliation, regret, and an unspoken understanding that something irreversible had just occurred. The diners, once so confident in their hierarchy, now sat quietly, their gazes flickering between Sophia and the exit, where the storm raged on. Sophia's hands trembled as she reached for the nearest chair, sinking into it as if the weight of her actions had finally caught up with her. She had built this empire on arrogance, on carefully deciding who was worthy and who wasn't. And tonight, that empire had crumbled at her feet. Emma hesitated for a moment, then took a cautious step forward. Unlike before, her fear had faded, replaced by something stronger, conviction. She cleared her throat and, for the first time, looked Sophia directly in the eye. "You never even checked the list," she said, her voice steady. The simple truth hit harder than any reprimand. Sophia blinked, but no words came. What excuse was there to give? The truth had been there all along, but she had chosen ignorance over fairness, assumption over respect. Meanwhile, James Lancaster swirled his untouched glass of wine, exhaling deeply. Well, he muttered, almost to himself, I suppose we've all learned something tonight. Outside, the storm had begun to settle. But inside, the lesson, the warning, would not be forgotten. 4-0.